Injuries, upsets, misfortune. Every player experiences all these things throughout their NBA careers, some unfortunately more than others. But there's an NBA superstar I think has faced more of these problems more than any other star has faced during their careers. Injury after injury, upset after upset, misfortune one after the other. Just flat out unlucky. His name is Joel Embiid. The reigning MVP of the league can't seem to rise above expectations, whether it be a poor performance by his standard or things out of his control taking place. To see what I mean, I'm going to give you a recap of the misfortune of Joel Embiid. After being drafted by the 76ers 3rd overall in the 2014 NBA draft, Embiid would miss the whole 2014 season before even playing the game with a broken bone in his right foot, while also dealing with injuries. 4 months after being drafted, Embiid's younger brother, Arthur, died in a car accident in Africa at the age of 13. The news deeply affected Embiid and caused him to question retirement before even stepping on an NBA court. But Embiid chose to stay in the league and used the tragic event to motivate him entering the next season to be better and healthier, saying, "I felt like if I did that, then my brother would be really proud of me." Next season, 2015, the 76ers would draft Jahlil Okafor with the 3rd pick. Despite the team drafting Embiid a year ago, the 76ers weren't sure if they could count on him long term, so they drafted one of the best big men in the draft class. And spoiler alert, Okafor did not become the dominant big man he was projected to be. Out of the other players in the draft lottery, he's played the least amount of NBA games. Another player the 76ers could have used the 3rd pick on was Devin Booker, who went to the Phoenix Suns with the 13th pick. A month after the draft, it was announced that Embiid would miss the entire 2015 season after having a setback with the same foot injury, 2 years in the league and 0 games to show for it. The 2016 draft would come around, and the Sixers would get the number 1 pick in the draft, and they would select Ben Simmons. But after missing the first 56 games into the new season, Simmons would be ruled out the remainder of the year with a broken bone in his right foot. The 2017 season would roll around, and Joel Embiid would play his first game in the league 2 years after being drafted. But after 31 games, he would tear his meniscus, which would require a season-ending injury. 3 years into the league, and Embiid can't seem to stay healthy. In the 2017 draft, the 76ers would trade multiple draft picks along with their number 3 pick to the Boston Celtics to ensure they drafted point guard Markelle Fultz, while the Celtics would use the number 3 pick on forward Jayson Tatum. Fultz would play great in the summer league, but became unplayable because of a mystery shoulder injury which affected his jump shot. Moving on to 2018, the 76ers would make the playoffs, but earlier on in the year, Embiid would suffer an orbital fracture and would miss 2 playoff games against the Heat. But the Sixers were able to move on to the second round, where they would get eliminated by the guy they could have drafted, Jayson Tatum, along with the Boston Celtics. In the 2018 draft, the 76ers would pick Mikal Bridges with the 10th pick, but they would immediately trade him to the Phoenix Suns for Zaire Smith and a 2021 first-round pick. Today, Bridges is one of the premier defensive players in the league, along with being a good 3-point shooter. During the 2018-2019 season, the 76ers would acquire Jimmy Butler from Minnesota in a trade in November. But again, Embiid would get injured and miss time with the team due to knee tendonitis. Despite the injury, he would still play in those playoffs, entering as a 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference. But the 76ers would lose to the second round by this shot.
By Simmons, is this the dagger?
Coming into the 2020 season, the 76ers would ship Jimmy Butler and Markelle Fultz in separate trades. Markelle wasn't valued by the team anymore, and Jimmy Butler didn't like how the team was treating him. Then in January, Embiid would again get injured throughout the season with a torn ligament in his left hand, which required surgery and would cause him to miss substantial time on the floor. Then on March 11th, the NBA and pretty much everything took a break due to the pandemic, which gave time for Embiid's hand to heal. Then the NBA decided to finish the 2020 season with the bubble. The 76ers would end up as a 6th seed into the playoffs, but they would lose Ben Simmons, who had to leave the bubble to get surgery on his left knee. Despite averaging 30 points per game in round 1 of the playoffs, the 76ers would get swept by none other than Jayson Tatum and the Boston Celtics. After the season, the 76ers would fire head coach Brett Brown. In 2021, they would hire Doc Rivers to be head coach and Daryl Morey to be president of basketball operations. Entering the playoffs, the 76ers would play as the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Embiid would be diagnosed with a partial torn meniscus in his right knee, but he'd managed to play through it throughout the playoffs. But it didn't matter, as the 76ers would lose to the Atlanta Hawks in the playoffs, with Embiid's best teammates putting up these type of stats. Simmons also made NBA history as the worst free throw shooter in playoff history, shooting just 34.2% from the line. After the game, Embiid would blame Simmons for the loss.
I don't know how to say it, but I thought the turning point was just, we had an open shot and, we made one free throw and we missed the other, and then they came down and scored, and we didn't get it.
And he would also lose the MVP race to Nikola Jokic and miss out on being All-NBA first team, despite averaging 28.5 points and 10.6 rebounds a game. Into the 2022 season, Ben Simmons decides he doesn't want to play for Philadelphia anymore and requests a trade with 4 years left on his contract. He would miss the first 54 games that year before getting traded for James Harden at the trade deadline. The 76ers would enter the playoffs as the 4th seed and would face the Toronto Raptors. During the playoffs, Embiid would play through a torn ligament in his thumb, an injury that would require surgery. But he chose to get surgery after the playoffs. In Game 6 of the first round, Embiid would suffer an orbital fracture with a mild concussion that would keep him out the first 2 playoff games in the next round against the Miami Heat. And just like last season, his best teammate would let him down in the playoff series, as the Sixers would lose to the guy they traded 2 seasons ago, Jimmy Butler.
Tobias Harris over me?
Oh, and for the second year in a row, Joel Embiid would lose the MVP trophy to Nikola Jokic and miss out again on All-NBA first team. Entering the next season, Joel Embiid would finally win the MVP trophy he's been wanting, while Nikola Jokic came in second. Into the playoffs, the 76ers would sweep the Brooklyn Nets in the first round, but history would repeat itself as Joel Embiid would go down with a knee sprain injury. He would have missed the next 3 games. The injury would hinder him throughout the next matchup with the Boston Celtics, but the 76ers would take a 3-2 lead with a chance to close the series on their home court. Embiid would drop 26 points and 10 rebounds in Game 6, but his all-star point guard would fail to show up as James Harden would only drop 13 points on 4-16 shooting. Sound familiar? The Celtics forced a Game 7 where the 76ers would lose, as Jason Tatum, the guy they could have drafted, would drop an NBA playoff record 51 points in Game 7, while both Embiid and Harden would just drop 24 points. Combined, eliminated again in the second round of the playoffs. 2 days later, the 76ers would fire head coach Doc Rivers. And to make matters worse, Embiid's rival, Nikola Jokic, will go on to win the NBA Finals and win Finals MVP, solidifying himself without a doubt that he is currently the best player on the planet. Then, on June 29th, in the offseason, it would be announced that James Harden is opting into his $35.6 million contract, only to be expected to be traded by the start of the next season. History repeating itself as Joel Embiid's all-star guard requests to leave his team once again. But on August 12th, the 76ers would announce they are ending trade talks on James Harden and plan to bring him back at the start of the next season. 2 days after the news broke, James Harden would make his response on his tour in China.
Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of.
Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be part of an organization he's part of. He said it twice just to make sure he wasn't mistaken. No one is sure if James Harden will show up to training camp or the start of the season, but all signs point to him being a disengaged teammate like he did in Houston and Brooklyn. But if Harden decides to choose the Ben Simmons route and not show up for games or practice, he could lose up to $389,000 a game, according to the new CBA. Obviously, the 76ers' success is upon Joel Embiid showing up in big games. There are times he shows up, and other times he fails to rise to the occasion. And with Embiid winning the MVP last season, he's now the only NBA MVP to never reach the conference finals in the playoffs. Out of the 68 times the award has been given, he's the only one. Embiid has had both a successful and miserable NBA career. Every high he reaches ultimately comes with an unbearable low. With his injury history and age, time is running out for Embiid in his championship window. Maybe the 2024 season might be his lucky break.